Bookcase and Coffee presents Buzzing About Romance, a quick shot of romance.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Buzzing About Romance. On this episode of A Quick Shot of Romance, I am joined by Heather, who is Minnesota Hockey Mom, reads on Instagram, and we are reviewing Edge of Eon by Anna Hackett. This is book 1 in her Eon Warriors series. Welcome back to the podcast, Heather.
Hey, Leah. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to go ahead and read the synopsis from Goodreads?
Absolutely. Framed for a crime she didn't commit, a wrongly imprisoned space captain's only chance of freedom is to abduct a fearsome alien war commander. Subcaptain Eve Traynor knows a suicide mission when she sees one. With deadly insectoid aliens threatening to invade Earth, the planet's only chance of survival is to get the attention of the fierce Eon Warriors. But the Eon want nothing to do with Earth, and Eve wants nothing to do with abducting War Commander Davion Thann-Eon off his warship. But when Earth's Space Corps threatens her sisters, Eve will do anything to keep them safe, even if it means she might not make it back. War Commander Davion Thann-Eon is taking his first vacation in years, dedicated to keeping the Eon Empire safe. He's been born and bred to protect. But when he's attacked and snatched off his very own warship, he is shocked to find himself face to face with a bold, tough little Terran warrior who both infuriates and intrigues him. When their shuttle is attacked by ravenous insectoids, Cantos, Eve and Davion crash land on the terrifying hunter planet known as Hunter 7, a planet designed to test a warrior to its limits. Now the pair must work together to survive, caught between the planet and its dangers and the Cantos hunting them, and their own incendiary attraction.
Okay, so incendiary.
Incendiary
is the word.
I don't know my cheaters.
Okay, so this book was released December 9th, 2018. So it's a couple of years old, and the tropes are sci-fi, military, alien. It's kind of a slow burn, but not really. But there's also an instant connection, which they talk about, but don't really act on.
Yeah, and I don't think they understand it. If that kind of just how the planet Eon goes, it doesn't seem like
definitely he does not. Like Eve talks about like how hot he is and like the connection and all of that, but like he doesn't get like why he's feeling this way. And then the steam level, I agree, it's like a 2 or a 3 because there's not a lot of moments, but there's some hot moments. I'd say this one is like the least steamy out of the series.
I think there's more like sexual tension. I think they try to avoid it, and I think it's because he is like very focused on his job.
Yeah.
Like he's basically like, I ain't got time for that. Like that's not what my people do.
Yes. Well, and when you first meet him, like we'll talk about Davion first. So like when we first meet him, he's going on vacation, but instead of going to one of these pleasure planets that they have, where basically it's just a planet that they can go to and have sex like with whoever. Instead of going
it'd be like going to the Bahamas or something
but
really
instead
nice.
of going there, he is choosing to go to this like planet created solely for training, which is just insane.
Yeah, it'd be like a military guy being like, I'm going to go take a vacation, but I'm going to go back to basic training. You know what I mean? But like this, like
all by myself and just do everything on my own.
And just, and so like this planet I found the planet very fascinating. Like, I'm not going to lie. I thought it was super interesting how it all works. So it was like they landed and they were on this kind of like jungle planet and it was hot. And then all of a sudden it like started to shake. And she's like, what the freak is happening? And he's like, oh, it's changing biomes or whatever. And then all of a sudden it just changed to like Alaska. And she's like, what? And then like the deadly animals and things that are there. And he's like, oh yeah, that's probably deadly. And she's like, I'm sorry, what's happening?
Well, but even as they were traipsing through like the jungle and she touches stuff, he's like, don't do that, because like everything there is meant to create like a training exercise basically. And
it's like
they
meant
go
to wreak havoc.
yes, so the planet, like throughout the course of the book, it is the jungle. It's like a cold, like North Pole-ish Arctic type thing. Then it goes to the desert. And then this like water, like land with lava, like it's just
so
crazy. And you're just kind of stuck wherever it changes, how it changes. So at one point they're standing there in were they in the snow or the sand when it switches to the water, and they're like swept up in the water because of where they were standing.
Right. I'm like, I know. And because then as it's switching, you know, you don't know where if you're standing is actually going to be water. And then the crazy other bug aliens that are after them are like ruthless.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a wild ride. And I was not bored at any point in that book. I was not bored.
No. Let's talk about.
Go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
It just made you want to keep reading.
It's such a good series, but let's talk about Eve just a little bit. So she is in prison because she was the sub commander, I think sub captain.
Yeah.
So she is a sub captain. She is working underneath a man who got his job because of who his mom is, and the mission that they are on goes bad. She gets blamed because she is below him, and like his mommy fixes everything for him, as Eve constantly says. And so she gets put in jail. So she has been in jail for 5 months and is basically blackmailed by the idea that they are going to do something to her sisters, because she has 2 sisters, into taking the war commander hostage. And that is like what starts the whole ordeal. Like she is not okay with this going on. She's not okay with the fact that she has to make this decision because she loves her sisters. Like there's obvious love and devotion to her sisters because after her dad passed away and her mom went like down the tubes, basically, like it was just her and her sisters against the world. And she would do anything for them.
They're a military family. So her dad was in the military, so in the same branch, and died fighting the Cantos. And then basically the mom went off the deep end, and the sisters were left to fend for themselves. And they have a really strong bond. And she doesn't want anything to happen to her sister. She is very feisty. She is badass. I mean, she can keep up with, he's like one of the most decorated, you know, I don't want to say like military members of his planet or whatever. I mean, he's badass, and she can keep up with him. And he was like, so he respected that. He was like, holy, obviously at first she kidnaps him. He's a big dude.
And then he's a big dude, but he's also shocked that this tiny little, and they call humans Terrans, so this tiny little Terran woman had the capability and the balls to like go after him and kidnap him and like hijack his vacation.
Right. And then so they get to this planet, and because I think they were attacked, and then they ended up on this planet, and he definitely doesn't want to have feelings for her. I mean, he's like, girl, listen, I get what you're up to, but it's not happening, and whatever. But then like as they're on this planet and they kind of have to work together, he's like realizing that he likes her and he's falling, but he has no control over it. Like they have no control over it.
Well, and they talk a little bit about how the the members of his planet and like the surrounding planets have their Hellion, which is like this some sort of symbiotic thing that they get attached to them. And they do explain it in one of the later books that they go into a little bit more depth about it. But basically, like it creates their armor, it creates their weapons, like it heals them from the inside out. Like it helps gauge their feelings. And so, but this Hellion also is part of like their whole mating ritual, like because they're aliens and they have mates and they can only procreate with their mate. And so, but throughout the book, like little things with the Hellion happen, which I don't want to say what they are because that will definitely give things away, but little things happen with this Hellion and he doesn't know how to react to it because he's never seen what happens
or
ever
heard
before
of it, because I mean, I also don't want to give it away, but there aren't a lot of mates, and so they have to figure out a different way to create, like it's like they're genetically creating, perfect specimens.
They're creating, like they're essentially making test tube babies,
right?
Because like again, like only mates can naturally have a child. So they have so their species doesn't die off. Like they had to figure out how they would continue on with their life force. And so they created like these babies basically because they don't want to die off.
Yeah. And people adopt them. And it sounds like, some of them are adopted by like single people or some have found, mates,
chosen mates.
Yes, chosen mates. I think what is I'm not a huge sci-fi reader, and I'm trying to branch out as a reader. It fascinates me, the amount of work and effort and thought and planning that has to go into creating a sci-fi series, because you're not just like, oh, this takes place in Boston and I can like Google map Boston. Like you have to create a whole new setting. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and in this series, like it's a dystopian type of series where like the Cantos like attacked Earth, and I mean they space travel from planet to planet and like universe to universe. Like it's nothing. Like there's so much like intergalactic travel that it's like there's such a world that is created in this book, in this series, but it makes sense. And that's the big thing. Like,
yeah, and
it makes a lot of sense.
It doesn't feel far-fetched. Like, I think that was one thing I was thinking that sci-fi would do. It'd be very far-fetched, but it's not. I mean, and there are parts because they're Terrans, but they're human and they come from Earth. And so there are some things where they're like, oh, kind of how they talk about the human race. And you're like, yeah, they kind of describe the human race pretty well.
It does,
I mean,
yeah.
So it was interesting. Yeah. So.
Well, and I thought it was interesting also though, that like these Cantos they're insects they're like mutant insects, but they are the ones that are attacking like the aliens. They are the ones that are attacking Earth. In this story, there's a lot of world building in it, and it's basically how these two worlds are combining together to fight the Cantos together. The humans had previously reached out to the king, and he wanted nothing to do with them. And so Earth was kind of on its own doing their thing. And all of these Eon Warriors were working together and doing their thing. But this world that Anna Hackett has created in this story, like there's a lot of little pieces and little mechanicals that come together to create the basis of this entire series.
Right. And in this story, the humans or the Terrans are really imploring the Eons to help save the population of Earth and the human race.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I really like about this is, when they fall hard and fast, which it's kind of like an insta love, where I think you and I both really like those, because they're generally
I do like an instant.
But I love how much respect he has for her. Like, Davion really respects Eve, and it's like a partnership. It's not. He's
not like, I'm a warrior, I know what I'm doing, I am in command. He's like, she is a warrior in her own right. Like, she did this for me. Like, she didn't leave when I asked her to, because she wanted to fight for me and with me. And I thought that was a big thing, because he even talked about how it's not unheard of for a female Eon warrior to be part of their military, but it's not common. And so to see this tiny, like the way they describe her, like she's tiny, like she's a small, like she's a petite woman. And so this tiny little lady is like holding her own against all of these things. And so he has a genuine respect for her separately from the fact that he has fallen in love with her.
Yeah. And they're built like humans. I think there's some things where, alien, I don't want to say alien, but sci-fi romance where they're not really human. He's more human. He's just like a large, I think he's probably like 6'7". So he's super tall and bulky. And I think she was like, I'm like 5'1", so she's pretty little.
She is, but and that's the thing, like, and I felt like this is like a nice soft intro, especially because he is human in every sense of the word, built wise. Like, yes, he has the Hellion, and yes, like their eyes are a little bit different because of the Hellion, and like they're all built very similarly. They're all like, because they are a lot of test tube babies, for the lack of a better term. So there's a lot of similarities through all of them, but they still have like their own elements that are just theirs. And then the Terran human race has elements that are just theirs. And I thought it was an interesting way to do the entire series.
Yeah, I think it's a really good series. I think I told you, I was texting you, I read the first book, and it was a quick read. I think for me, it was, I know every book for you is a quick read. So listeners, I read a little bit slower. Leah's actually not human. She reads a lot faster than anybody I've ever met. So I think I read this in a couple hours. So it's a pretty quick read. And I immediately downloaded book 2. And I think I finished book 2
and
right away.
But it's one of those series, it sucks you in and you just don't want to stop.
And it's not like, and it's good. Like, I love the characters and the sisters. So the first 3 books are the sisters, and they're all different, which is great. I mean, if you're a mom, that your kids are not alike. It doesn't matter. They're all different. And so I just really like it's interesting, and their stories are interesting. I said there's a lot of drama, and that's not the right way to put it, because it's not drama, but it's like action. It's almost like an action movie. Does that make sense?
It does. But one thing that with this series you will find, and some people dislike this, but Anna Hackett, she does it from series to series because she has a set amount of books that she typically puts in a series. So the last couple chapters, or the last chapter, or a chapter like towards the end, is always in like the next book, like one of the people from the next book. And so it really sets up the next book in this series, because we get a chapter from Laura, who is one of Eve's sisters, and you meet her hero, and she gives him a run for his money. And it's gonna be so much fun. It's such a fun book.
Book 2 is amazing, and I'm on book 3 right now. Love that too. I noticed that with the first 2 books, it was like you get like almost like a chapter from the next book, and then it wraps up that book that you were reading.
But it all kind of ties in, like the timeline. It doesn't feel disjointed. It doesn't feel forced. Like it flows really well.
Yeah, because that's what it is. The story is just flowing. It's like if you're watching an episode, like a show on Netflix, and it just kind of all flows together. But yeah, it makes sense. But then again, it just sucks you in, because then you're like, ooh. But the chapter that you read for the next book isn't in the next book.
No.
Because sometimes authors do that, where you read the chapter and then you hop in and you're like, I feel like I read this before. And then you're like, oh, because I did.
But she does not do that. She ends her story and then she picks up the next book after that story is ended. But she doesn't cut those characters off. Like, you still get them, which I think is nice too.
Right. Super good.
So, to our questions. Did you like this book?
Yes, I really did. I feel like it was more human than alien. I think it's really a great starter sci-fi book.
Yes, I loved this book. It's alien light, I like to call it, but I'm also a huge fan of anything Anna Hackett writes, so I'm a little biased on that one.
And it reads like a military suspense to me, but in outer space.
It does. It really does, which is probably why I really liked it to start with, because this series is how I found her, I think. Or maybe it was her treasure hunter. I don't know. She just is so good. But so anyway, who would typically like this book?
I think anyone who's unsure if sci-fi is something that could be their jam or that they would be interested in. If you like suspense or a little dystopian in your life, if you're not sure about sci-fi and you're kind of looking for a quick read with like a good solid author, like I like her writing style, I definitely would check this out. And it's on KU, so there's really no reason to check it out.
It is KU. But yeah, readers who like a good suspense book with a little romance mixed in, because it's not romance heavy, like but it's not romance light at the same time. Like, I feel like she gives you the perfect amount of blend. But
yeah, it is. There's romance, but it's sort of, you know how when you meet two people in your life and they're together and you're like, well, yeah, like one person doesn't really exist without the other. Like it's these people finding the person that they shouldn't exist without.
So would you recommend this book?
Absolutely. I think I have. And I mean, I just read it this week. So I think there's some other people I'm like, you should totally check this out. I even told my son, I was like, my 14-year-old is a big dystopian sci-fi reader. And I was telling him about this book and he's like, you're reading a sci-fi dystopian? I'm like, yeah, I don't think you'd want to read it, but I mean, it's in Kindle Unlimited. Go ahead and check her out.
He might be a little bit much for him though.
It might be, but you know.
Yeah, I have recommended this. I recommended it to Heather because I was like, we should totally read this for a quick shot. Like, it would be so good. I'm sorry you're going down the Anna Hackett rabbit hole because it's not real small.
No, and that's fine. I mean, just what I need, right? I keep looking and I'm like, well, my October is pretty light. I bet I could, add some more.
Well, but one little tidbit for this, the final book in the series comes out September 7th. I think the 7th. But it is the final book. Like, so you have something to look forward to. And after that, then you can move to one for other series.
Yeah. So how many books are we talking here? I think it will be 8 total.
Will be 7 in this series.
Oh.
I think. Well, I'm pretty sure the King's book is book 7.
So it could be
8 total.
I'm looking in Kindle Unlimited right now. So book 4. Okay, so book 2 is Touch of Eon. 3 is Heart of Eon. 4 is Kiss of Eon. 5 is Mark of Eon. 6 is Claim of Eon. 7 is Storm of Eon. And 8 is Soul of Eon.
Oh, so there's 9. Okay.
So I think there's 9, but because the 9th book isn't listed, but they're all here. So I think there's 9.
Well, there was 9. So But
I mean, there's 7
well,
days in a week, people. So it's just a little over a book a day. I mean, you can do it.
you can. But so we are out of time and probably a little over time, but we just can't stop ourselves tonight. But so thank you so much, Heather, for joining me on this quick shot of romance.
Anytime. Love to chat about books anytime, Leah.
Happy reading, everybody.
Bye.
Find us on Instagram at buzzingaboutromance or on Twitter at buzzingromance. If you like the podcast, please leave a review. If you'd like to support us directly, join the Bookcase and Coffee Patreon and receive exclusive content only available to Patreon members. Check out bookcaseandcoffee.com for our on-the-shelf show notes.